Hello, good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm your moderator for today's session and would like to welcome you all for our 20th Masterclass. As we begin our Masterclass for today, would like to basically request you all to please keep yourselves on mute. And if you do have any questions, please post your questions on the chat window, which is located at the bottom right-hand corner of the WebEx window. And we will be recording this session and it will be made available to you on our website. If you would want to listen to it later as well or share it, you could also do that. So welcome all of you for our masterclass on Save Lockbox Fees with Remittance Data Capture AI. And we have with us our masterclass speaker, John Salick. He's the Strategic AR Advisor for Emagia Corporation. John, over to you.
Thank you, Akshay, and welcome everyone. We've got another good program for you today, and I think you'll find it enlightening in regarding the cash application operation. So we'll start off with an introduction. I'll give you some background, and then we'll talk about what traditional lockbox service constitutes. And then we'll visit quickly a definition of what exactly is remittance data capture artificial intelligence. What does it do? And then we'll kind of combine the two and say, what does remittance data capture do for the cost of lockbox services? And what you'll see is it can substantially reduce those costs. We'll talk about those costs and the benefits, as well as some other benefits. Wrap it up with a conclusion with the takeaways from this webinar, and then answer any questions you might have. So let me spend a few minutes here on an introduction to properly put this topic in the right context. First of all, cash application is an operation that generally doesn't get much attention. If it's done well, it's basically invisible. Only those responsible for it or involved in it generally have an appreciation for its value. When cash application does attract attention, it's because something has gone wrong and has aggravated a customer or customers. And then all of a sudden it gets a lot of scrutiny. So we'll talk about that in a little more depth later on. But like any operation, if you're responsible for it, if you're the manager for it, and you can bring about improvements, well, that's a big win for you personally and for your company. And if that improvement is in reducing cost, that seems to be very popular among senior management and something that'll get you a lot of positive attention. And we'll certainly look at the cost implications of AI and digital data capture. So to give you a little more background, there's been major advancements in digital technologies that you've all heard about and read about for some time now, as well as the proliferation of new digital payment modes, such as Square, PayPal, and really at least a dozen others. And these are interesting, provide a lot of benefits. And in particular, they can bring substantial benefits to cash application in general, and even more specifically, significant reductions to the lockbox fees you're paying your bank. And what are these improvements? Well, they're basically in what we call information capture. That is where you receive the remit advice directly from your customer. the technology extracts the required remittance data, puts it in a file, and then that file is used to automatically apply those payments to open invoices. And the underlying technologies are all terms and acronyms that you've probably all heard in the last couple of years. Machine learning, natural language understanding, the champion artificial intelligence or AI. This phrase that we'll be using a bit today, document data capture and their assistants, such as Emagia's Gia digital assistant, whose picture you see in the upper right there. And that's all part of what's called intelligent document processing. And these technologies in particular bring significant benefits to cash application. So let's look at, our focus today is Lockbox services and the ability to reduce their cost. Let's take a quick look at them. What in a nutshell, do traditional Lockbox services do? Well, first of all, they receive payments from your customer and deposit in your bank account. I mean, that's great. Doesn't get any better than that because they do it fast. They do it pretty efficiently. And that cash is available to you same day or next day. At least the vast majority of it is. So great. And that eliminates the need for you to receive payments, particularly checks, in one of your offices or many of your offices, then having to secure them, get them to the bank one way or another. And that raises all sorts of, one, additional costs, but two, a lot of audit issues. Having live checks floating around the office is not a good thing. And certainly both your internal and your external auditors will make a big deal about that. And it's very avoidable by just having the lockbox. But the other dimension of the bank lockbox is the cost. And for some companies, it can be significant. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute or so. But what are those costs? Well, first of all, there's monthly fees for renting the lockbox and maintenance. The bank performs maintenance on the lockbox, and those are a fixed cost. Then on the variable side, if you're getting paper checks and paper remit advice, which I assume you all still do, even though there's been a major movement away from paper checks, probably have some customers that still send you the paper checks and the paper remit advice. So the lockbox is going to scan both those documents on a per transaction fee. And then they'll key the data from those remittance advices into a file. And that's charged on a per keystroke fee. If you have a lot of small invoices, or just a lot of invoices, particularly a lot of small invoices, and you get a check that pays 7 or 8 invoices, that's a lot of keystrokes. And that's going to cost a fair amount of money. That's one thing if that check is for $720,000, then it's not such a big deal. But if the check is for $184 and it pays 7 invoices, you're probably incurring some fairly significant keystroke fees that, several percent of the value of the check. Costs vary. Lockbox costs vary. Our best estimate is that total processing cost for a check is about $2.50. Again, if it's a $700,000 check, no big deal. If it's a $140 check, all right, then it starts to add up. Then, once this file is compiled, the bank transmits the file to their customer. The client uploads the file into a Cash App engine for Autocash. Well, that's great. No denying the benefits of Autocash. If for any reason the client doesn't have Autocash, then they manually input. And as I said earlier, if you have a lot of invoices, your fees are going to be pretty high. And despite all that, there still ends up being a significant volume of payments where remit advice is not clear. It's not captured by the bank lockbox team. Remember, they're under pressure to input a lot of data real fast. So they're not going to spend a lot of time trying to decipher unclear remit advice. They'll just default on it. And then it's up to the ultimate customer to end up contacting those customers and say, hey, we got your payment. Thank you very much. However, we're not exactly sure where to apply it. And this is where the document data digital assistants powered by AI come in. They reduce these scanning and data input keystroke fees, reduce them by a lot. And how do they do that? Well, by using Remittance Data Capture AI. What exactly is that? Without getting too technical, I've told you what they do, extract remittance data. But what's important here is from multiple sources in multiple formats and unstructured formats, meaning there's tremendous variation. And what are those sources? Well, customer vendor portals. Go to their portal, they'll tell you what they paid and what it's for. Your own EIPP or customer care portal. Customers visit that portal, make a payment, and input the invoices that they're paying. And then the customer will send various files in Excel, PDF, different statements for your EDI customers. Those remit advices come in on the EDI 820. And then the new digital payment modes convey the remit advice with the payment. And that's actually a nice feature. The remit advice and the payment travel together, which contrasts that with EDI. Your EDI customers pay via ACH into your bank, but the remit advice comes in a separate transmission, the EDI 820. And sometimes that separation can cause problems. So the ability to extract data from multiple sources, multiple formats, and the digital assistant then creates a file to be run through Autocash application. And there's great capability and flexibility here to integrate with various banks and their lockboxes and your own ERP, the AR and collection modules. And if you're in a shared service operation and you're dealing with more than one ERP, this integration capability is a big plus. All right. So we talked about traditional lockbox services. We talked about the document data capture. And we put them together. How do they reduce lockbox costs? Well, as we mentioned earlier, you receive the remit advices directly from various forms and sources. And then instead of having a human being read these documents or messages, the digital assistant, Gia, does, and extracts the required remit data, like the invoice number they're paying, the amount, any deductions, things like that. That is needed to apply the customer payments accurately to the open invoices. Digital assistant does all that, and that's totally automated, except for a few that can't be read for whatever reason. Takes that remit data, creates a file. The file is ready to go. It's fed into your Autocash engine to apply the cash. So what changes? Well, certainly the check and remit advice scanning fees go down, and this key punch per keystroke fee goes way down because the digital assistant is creating that file, not the bank lockbox. And our feeling, our best estimates are savings of $1 or $2 per payment can be realized. And again, if you're a high volume operation where you're getting a lot of payments, you're incurring a lot of lockbox fees. And it's particularly painful if those payments are a relatively small value, because then the lockbox fees can constitute 1, 2, 3, maybe 4% of the remittance. So all of a sudden, instead of collecting 100 cents on the dollar, post lockbox fees, you're collecting 96, 97 cents on the dollar, which, adds up, reduces your gross margin. These digital assistants can make a real impact here. And when you combine that with a customer payment behavior change program to encourage your customers to move away from paying by check to any of these various electronic modes, that will further decrease your bank lockbox costs. Now, changing customer behavior is not easy. This is not a 90-day program. This is probably more like a 2-year program, and you just kind of repeat and be persistent and stay at it, and eventually you'll start to move a significant percentage of your customers who are paying by check today to pay by some electronic means. Again, it just takes time, and if you've been involved in anything like that with customer behavior, you know what I'm talking about. The impact on bank lockbox fees. But there's other very important and very large cost savings as well with data capture AI. These AI modules come with their own Autocash engines. And it's been our experience with several clients now that those Autocash hit rates have hit 90%. And, that further delivers productivity. So again, if you've got 8 people applying cash, your Autocash hit rate is 60%. Well, you take that hit rate to 90%. Instead of needing 8 people, maybe you only need 3 or 4. And that's where a big saving is produced. At the end of the day, when you think about Cash App and you think about a lot of the tasks that once were performed by humans and maybe still are, data capture AI can automate 70, 80, even 90% of the manual tasks. And, that's what drives the productivity. We'll talk about the benefits there besides just plain cost. But before we do that, I mentioned in the introduction that cash application is an unappreciated function. That doesn't mean it's easy or simple or without challenges. What are the major challenges, and how does data capture AI meet these challenges? Well, let's go down this list here of challenges. Payments coming in multiple currencies, remit advice in multiple languages. Again, if you're with a global shared service organization or even a regional shared service organization, you're dealing with multiple currencies and multiple languages. You're probably dealing with multiple ERPs. Your customers utilize multiple banks and their lockboxes, many of which will have their own little idiosyncrasies, which introduces complexity into the game here. The ability to accommodate the new digital payments. Customers are gravitating to that, particularly the small and medium-sized customers. That's how they prefer to pay. And my belief is the reason why small and medium-sized businesses are adopting the frictionless digital payments rapidly is, the bulk of their day is spent securing and fulfilling orders, dealing with personnel things, et cetera, et cetera. For many of them, paying vendor invoices is done in the evenings or weekends, kind of off normal business hours. And these digital payments enable that, facilitate that, and make it very, very easy for them. So I think that's why we're seeing a strong uptake for these new frictionless digital methods. What's another big challenge of Cash App? Well, I alluded to it earlier, the remit advice, right? the different modes: paper, EDI, email, the vendor portals, your own EIPP portal. And one of the complaints we get about vendor portals is that they're different. And it takes a fair amount of time and effort to become proficient in navigating these vendor portals so you can quickly get the information you need. And, people say it takes sometimes, 10, 12, 15 hours to become proficient. Because we ask them, we say, well, geez, the vendor portals are great. Everything you need is right there. And they say, well, yes and no. Yes, after you've mastered it. And so a lot of them say that they don't use a number of their customers' vendor portals. Certainly their larger, high volume customers, they do, because the payoff is there. So there's a lot of noise in reading, understanding, and processing remit advice. And the remit advice comes in almost an infinite number of formats. If you have 1,000 customers, I'd argue that the remit advice comes in 900 different formats, maybe more. And I mentioned earlier the wide variance in customer vendor portals. Part of that is caused by the suppliers of the vendor portals or competitors, and they're trying to differentiate their product from the competition and hopefully make it better. So there's a lot of challenges to Cash App for an unsung, unappreciated operation. And the document data capture assistance powered by AI meets these challenges very, very well. What are the benefits? Well, we've been talking about them here. I've been talking about them for the last 20 minutes. Productivity, fewer people required. You can take those folks and redeploy them to higher level tasks. The reduced bank lockbox fees, which is the title and the main focus of our webinar today. And it can add up. Anytime you're running a operation, as I mentioned earlier, and you can realize cost reduction, you'll be appreciated and it will be noticed. Another benefit is the faster application of cash. The digital assistant reads the remit advice, puts it in the file runs through the Autocash, customers' accounts are updated. This is particularly important for customers who are paying you slowly, have a significant past due balance, and are subject to order holds. Nothing's worse. Get an order from a customer, check their AR, hold the order, call them up and say, we'd like to fill your order, but we can't because you didn't pay us those invoices from March. The customer says, what are you talking about? I paid him last week. Your Cash App operation is lagging and their account didn't show those payments. And that's when Cash App garners attention from management, and it's not good attention. So you get more speed, you also get better accuracy. And if you've ever had to unravel misapplied cash, you know the value of that. What's our conclusions? There's a significant opportunity to improve the Cash App operation. Improve it on a number of dimensions. Specifically, our focus today is on reducing bank lockbox fees. And as I've said, anytime you can bring cost reduction to an operation for which you're responsible, that's a good thing. How does it do it? A lot of different technologies, primarily AI and its related technologies are the drivers. And in addition to just reducing lockbox fees, AI automation can bring a high level of automation to this operation. Your questions.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Let's begin with the questions. Before we begin, I'd also like to again remind all the participants to please key in your questions on the chat window to the host, and we'll take your questions as they come in. John, we have the first question here. I know you did mention about Lockbox service and all, and there are still a lot of people who are using the traditional Lockbox services as well. So the question is, what are the costliest bank Lockbox services?
Well, it's the scanning, imaging of the check and the remit advice, and then it's the key punching the remit data file that is then sent to the customer to be run through their Autocash engine. That's where the big costs. The monthly fees aren't that big, particularly if you're a high invoice generating company with a lot of customers and you got a lot of payments in. Then those two operations are what drives the Lockbox cost up the most.
Thank you. Let's get to our next question. How do AI document data capture assistants reduce bank Lockbox fees?
One, by reducing the scanning charges, and more importantly, reducing the data input per keystroke charge for building the remittance file. You'll never totally eliminate that because you'll still have some customers who are going to send that paper check and paper remit into your Lockbox. But the objective is to reduce it drastically. And that's where the big cost savings come.
Thank you, John. I think we're just getting on top of the hour here. We'll take one more question. The question is, do AI cache application modules also include Autocash capabilities?
They do. It's such an essential part of cash application today that quite honestly, it'd be foolish to offer a cash app capability that doesn't have an Autocash engine in it. But here again, with using some of the more recent technologies, such as machine learning, natural language processing, these AI cash app engines are generally able to do a better job and achieve a higher hit rate than those contained within your ERP or other applications.
Thank you very much, John. So we just have a few seconds left. So we would like to thank all the participants over here for joining us for today's session. And we are going to be having our next session on 1st of July. The topic would be Lockbox and remittance data extraction with AI. And in the meanwhile, if you do have any questions that you want to ask us with respect to any of our solutions or with respect to today's masterclass, you could write to us at info@emagia.com. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday, the 1st of July, for our next masterclass session. Thank you very much.
That's right.
Thanks a lot, John. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And don't leave for your July 4th holiday without attending this webinar. You'll regret it the whole weekend. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Okay. Yeah. Bye.